Welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to talk about the DR-Z4S and the DR-Z4SM that Suzuki unveiled on November 5th at the EICMA Show in Milan, Italy. It's a great big motorcycle show that manufacturers oftentimes will release their new bikes, and that's exactly what Suzuki did. So when they unveiled it, they published a video on YouTube, and I stumbled across that video and I've watched it a bunch of times. And then later throughout the day on Tuesday, November 5th, I did a bunch of research and found a bunch of news articles that have come out, and then a few more since then. So what we're going to do is go through that video and take a deep dive and look at a bunch of things and point out some observations that I've had in the video, as well as take a look at some of those still photos and point out some things that I've seen. I've got the video queued up, and what we're going to do is play through this. I'll skip through the non-important parts and then pause the video at various points where I want to point out some observations that I've had as I've watched the video. What we're going to do is jump ahead to about 23, 24 seconds. So coming up here, they switch the drive mode. So watch closely. You can see the background whizzing by to imply that they are in motion. And here you can see, as he's adjusting that drive mode, their speed is 22 to 23 miles an hour. It fluctuates just a little bit. And then also notice right there is a little symbol. That is a symbol that I'll discuss later. And here we are at 0.1 mile. So that's the drive mode, or the rider mode. Suzuki calls it the Suzuki drive mode selector. A lot of other bike manufacturers call it the rider mode or ride mode. So they pull off the pavement and they come to a complete stop right here. So when they do this, they are actually adjusting the traction control. So we can pretty much assume that the bike has to be at a complete stop before you can make any adjustments to the traction control. That's just an educated guess by the fact that they did come to a complete stop. And here we see that the ABS light is lit again. Now, one thing I noticed here is this says trip A, 35 miles. So that tells us that the bike is similar to the other DR-Z, the old or current generation DR-Z, where it does have a trip A and a trip B. So another thing I noticed, we have this little adjust button, a little touchpad section of the button right there, and another little touchpad here. So hopefully that tells us that we can get into our various trip meters, trip A or trip B, and then make some adjustments forward or back to dial back the mileages. That has been a huge bonus of the current generation DR-Z, particularly for people that are doing dual sport events where you're maybe following a roll chart telling you how many miles to go before your next turn. If you miss a turn, then your mileages are all way off for the next portion of that route. So with an adjustable trip meter, you can go back to the last known point on the roll chart and then dial back your trip meter to that given mileage. That was a huge innovation back when Suzuki came out with the current generation DR-Z. For me, it's a huge plus because I ride dual sport events all the time. In fact, I also lay out the route for a particular dual sport event, so I use that function all the time on my current gen DR-Z that I've had since 2006. So taking another close look, this is cool that it tells us which gear we're in. Fuel gauge, clock, traction control mode, and then Suzuki drive mode selector right there. And we're going to jump ahead here in a bit. So they go through some pretty rugged terrain here, jumping up over some rocks and roots and whatnot. And then they come to a complete stop again. And now they're diddling with the ABS again. And right here we also see they have traction control turned off, which is indicated right there, and then also right there. So another thing I've noticed here is it is reading the odometer right now. So the odometer is only reading in full increments of miles. It's no longer measuring miles in tenths. Another thing I noticed is initially the rear ABS is off, and then when he pushes that button, the rear and front ABS appear to be disabled. Another thing I noticed, subframe looks identical right in this area. Here is the same style passenger foot peg that we see on the current generation DR-Z. The swing arm bolt, that looks identical. One thing I noticed that is way different is the rear brake reservoir and master cylinder. This is a nice upgrade. Current generation DR-Z, plastic reservoir, and those tended to swell up after a while and sort of protrude in this area here at the very top as well as at the back. Front and back, mine did it after probably about 4 or 5 years, but it didn't ever leak or anything. And probably about 3 years ago, I discovered that you could actually replace that reservoir separate from the entire master cylinder, so that's what I did. I just ordered the reservoir itself. Another thing that's different, the clutch cover. So we can no longer use the existing case guards because we've got this big raised area and then some indentations. Okay, so here's another thing we want to talk about. To me, the headlight and headlight shroud is absolutely hideous. It's not going to stop me from buying a DR-Z4S, but it is ugly. It looks like something that belongs in the aftermarket. It does not look to me like an OEM headlight. I mean, it is an OEM headlight. It just does not look like something that an OEM would come up with. There was just way too much white space and not enough headlight. It just looks out of proportion. So we do see front LED turn signals as well. It looks like it's using the same style of turn signal mounting brackets that mount to the upper triple clamp bolts. So that pretty much wraps it up as far as the deep dive into this video. So now we'll go ahead and pull some photos up on the screen, and I'll point out a bunch of other observations that I've had. First thing we'll do is take a look at the left side of the engine. So one of the first observations we see here is on the exhaust. We've got a sensor. It's probably an O2 sensor. We still have a little plastic guard here to protect rocks from damaging the stator cover. Another thing about the stator cover is the current style case guards will not work on the new generation DR-Z stator cover because we've got this big raised area right here. What else can we see here? Foot pegs are just a little bit wider. They still have the little rubber insert that anybody that does serious off-road riding usually takes off. In fact, most people that do some serious off-road riding generally upgrade to a wider foot peg. And that's probably what I will do unless these are fairly similar in width to the current wide foot pegs that I now have on my current DR-Z. This lower portion of the subframe looks to be the same. What else can we see here? So here is the second spark plug. The original spark plug, or the other spark plug, is at the top of the head, just like on the current generation DR-Z. And this is the ignition coil for that second spark plug. Let's take a look at the airbox. So this entire black area here, that is a little swing out door on the side cover, and that door opens up on hinges. The hinges are in this area right here. So it opens up to expose the airbox and the air filter. So this must be a little black rubber style cover that reveals the latch that keeps the airbox closed. Chain slider on the swing arm. This is quite a bit different. We have this big raised area right here. Swing arm bolt looks the same. Different mounting point where the top of the engine head secures to the frame. We see this bracket here, and then there's another bracket on the other side. That's about all I can point out on this particular photo. So let's move on to the next photo. Here's our airbox, and here's the two pins that hold in the airbox door. Those are the hinge points. So it looks like those pins are removable. I can see what appears to be a little clip that holds the bottom of the pin in place in a little groove. So it looks like if we open up the airbox door and need to take the airbox door off, we can pull those two little clips off the bottom of the pins and then pull the pins out. We do also have the infamous rubber snorkel in the top of the airbox, just like the current generation DR-Z has. the air boot that goes between the airbox and the throttle body fuel injection system. We can see that it's got sort of a vertical shape to it, at least that's what it appears here, so I can pretty much conclude that it's not likely the current generation DRZ's air filter will be cross-compatible with the DR-Z4S, because this looks like it's sort of going to be an oblong or oval shaped in a vertical fashion inside the airbox. Here's a close-up view of the right side foot peg, so it is pretty obvious that the foot peg is wider and the rear brake lever looks to be the same. Suzuki is offering an accessory. We have here front rotor guard, then we have a rear rotor guard, but mainly what I wanted to show here is I am not a fan of this style chain adjuster because it's a lot more complicated to adjust the chain. It's just more complex than the old school cam style adjusters that the DR-Z has had since day one, and that's what the DR-350 had too. Here we can also see the ring for the ABS system hidden on the front wheel. Behind this rotor cover is another similar ring for the front wheel ABS. Let's take a look at the right side of the bike. So this of course is with all of the bodywork and seat and everything removed. Case guard, same thing, won't fit over on this side either because of the different shape of the clutch cover. It's got some raised area and some contours. Rear brake lever, like I pointed out before, looks to be identical. This is probably the catalytic converter in the exhaust here. This portion of the frame, the subframe, looks to be identical. We also have what appears to be identical style foot peg mount for the rear passenger foot peg, as well as the lower mounting point for the exhaust. Should be able to use the similar style mount, which takes the place of the foot peg. It lets you delete the foot peg, but yet still have a mounting point for the exhaust. That's one of the things I did to my DR-Z probably before I even rode it. This portion of the rear subframe looks to be just a little bit different. Most of it's the same, but the little curved area here is missing. So let's go back over here. So this portion of the subframe, from this point back to this point, as well as down to this point, this appears to be a cast piece. So the subframe is made out of multiple pieces that have been welded together rather than a bunch of square tubing that's been formed and welded together. We do still have a piece of square tubing here that mounts to the frame that's been welded to this, what appears to be a cast piece. Same thing here. Let's go back to this image and we can see that a little bit better. Spacing on these two mounting bolts looks the same. And we also have a bar that goes across the top here. Part of that is missing. I think the image is just a little bit skewed in this 3D rendering. We also see on the frame here we've got the two outer, they call it a twin spar frame design. All of that had to be redesigned in order to accommodate making extra space here for all of the fuel injection componentry. We no longer have the original style little plastic guard to protect the water pump. That's missing. Don't know if the production bike will have that or not. Too early to tell. Upside down forks, that's going to be a nice upgrade. I don't think there's anything else. Oh, there is one thing. So the oil fill is now located right in the center of the frame. That looks like it might be a challenge adding a Scott steering stabilizer, which is what I have on my current DR-Z. With that being right in the center, it's going to probably eliminate the ability to do a Scott's stabilizer because it's sitting almost right at the level where the clamp would go around the headstock below the triple clamp. So that's going to be kind of a bummer. Coolant reservoir has been relocated up to the top. It used to be down on the other side of the bike, down in this area. Rear shock reservoir looks to be the same. That's pretty much it as far as looking at a close deep dive with all the bodywork removed on the right side of the bike. Here is a quick look at more details on the instrumentation system. So here we have all of the indicator lights lit up. So we've got turn signal indicator here, check engine light. Here's a little warning light, so presumably this would light up and then another little symbol would light up either here, here, or here, because we've got these three little lines pointing to a certain space on the LCD display. Then we have ABS mode. It will also light up various indicators for ABS right here. In some of the video clips I saw a little ABS symbol and then the word rear. Presumably that would indicate that the rear ABS is disabled. That's what I think anyway. So we have more indicator lights over on the right side. We got neutral indicator, another ABS light, and then traction control. And we also have the button for the ability to disable the ABS or change the ABS mode, and then adjust buttons for the trip meters. And then we have gear indicator, fuel gauge, time of day. I actually wish that the time of day was a little bit bigger, and then drive mode indicator, and then traction control indicator there. So another thing we see here is that the headlight shroud is held in place with these two bolts right here, one over on the left side, one on the right side. Looking at the right side controls, we've got bar end weight, grips that you could put safety wire in, but I'll end up replacing the grips once I get my DR-Z4S. And we have nothing too fancy here, a kill switch, starter button. Now what I have heard and read is that because this bike has a fuel injection system, it has a different style starting mode, so you don't simply have to just push the button in and hold it until the bike starts. It's all computer controlled, I guess, as far as the way it starts once you push the button. So all you have to do is push the button, release it, and the bike starts. Kind of like a push to start button on a lot of modern vehicles, I guess. Left side switch pod is completely different. So we have this big mode button in the center and then this toggle button, so we can go to the various settings and whatnot in the instrumentation to disable traction control and the Suzuki drive mode selector. Turn signal button down here like before, and then our horn button down at the bottom. Because we no longer have a spot up here for the high beam switch, that high beam switch has been moved to the front of the switch pod. Hit this little button right there to flash to pass, and then we have low beam and then high beam. To me, the bottom side of the frame looks identical. We can see here that is probably the drain bolt for the frame oil reservoir. Nothing else too spectacular to look at here. Now let's take a look at some of the Suzuki accessories that are going to be available for the DR-Z4S and 4SM. First up, we've got a nice aluminum skid plate. It's kind of cool to see a manufacturer offer an aluminum skid plate as an OEM accessory. So if we look here, it mounts to the side at the front and the back, and then we've got two mounting bosses on both sides of the frame. What that does is it frees up the bottom from any mounting hardware, so the bottom is nice and smooth and flat, and then you don't have mounting hardware down there to get banged up by rocks, which then makes it difficult to remove down the road when you need to do service work to the bottom of the bike. Next, we've got a nice DC power outlet. I would prefer a USB power outlet, but hopefully this hole is sized that the standard off-the-shelf USB power outlets will mount into it. We've also got a nice little clip here to secure your cable. And we've got some basic wind protection hand guards. That's really about all they do, is provide a little bit of protection from the wind, because they're just little guards that mount to the handlebar area. They don't actually fully wrap around and connect to the handlebars. Then we also got a rack. So looking here, all these dimensions look the same from the angle up here to the back. Spacing between these mounting points and the orientation of these mounting points. So with any luck, racks that are currently in production for the current model DR-Z will fit this new model DR-Z4S and 4SM. Not too applicable for the S model, but this is something the SM model would benefit from, as axle sliders front and rear. And then we've also got a front brake guard as well as a rear brake rotor guard. So here's a handful more photos that I found just throw those up on the screen too. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, which color you like, what your thoughts are on this new DR-Z4S and 4SM, and if you intend to buy one. I actually do intend to buy one. Tuesday morning, the day that the bike was released by Suzuki at the EICMA Show, I put a deposit on one at my local Suzuki dealer. Be sure to share this video on any discussion forums or groups that you participate in that are DR-Z specific, because so far I have not come across any other video or any information published online that goes into a deep dive discussion about some of the features of the new DR-Z4S and 4SM. And then also subscribe to my channel so you can keep up with new updates on my purchase experience, as well as when I get the bike in my possession and start riding it and doing some upgrades next year.